This video is so extremely explosive that Zweites Deutsches Fernsehen simply decided to delete all sources and evidence. You can't access it anymore, not even in the Zweites Deutsches Fernsehen media library. Who do they think they're fooling? Now that the gas storage levels are so extremely low that we have to beg the worst dictators in the world for gas, that's your context, not mine.
Russia still earns billions from gas exports, including to Europe, as Western companies continue buying large amounts of liquefied natural gas from Russia.
We all know that we get Russian gas here in Europe. By the way, did you know that Azerbaijan is one of the most important partners here in Germany, supplying us with oil and gas? No, many people didn't know that. And then Zweites Deutsches Fernsehen just thought, let's simply delete this great documentary we made about Azerbaijan. That can't be allowed, that the civilian population here in Germany knows who we're really buying gas from.
On one hand, it's an authoritarian, anti-democratic regime, but on the other hand, Azerbaijan also has a lot of oil and gas reserves, and the European Union is currently trying to become less dependent on Russian dominance in oil and gas supplies.
Yes, Azerbaijan, a country that is quite close to the Soviets. To put it very clearly, they buy gas from Russia and then resell it to us. That way their hands stay clean. And now comes the absolute worst case scenario. You probably already heard about it yesterday on Markus Lanz. Once again, they didn't leave anything out, but suddenly they did leave something out to absolutely go against the alternative for Germany. Yeah, it was a pretty reasonable conversation yesterday. And above all, they also, I would say, did a pretty good job of refraining from agitating against Donald Trump. And that was from Agnes Strack-Zimmermann, who was very moderate. And why is that? The magic word is called liquefied natural gas.
Maybe in a dictatorship, but that we have left the path, that the United States of America has left the path, is beyond doubt for me.
Earlier, you also reminded Mrs. Strack-Zimmermann that there are mass protests in America against the appearance of the alternative for Germany. Do we know? Do you think such mass protests could happen in China or Russia?
And why? Sorry? Well, there are two scenes that really touched me. Of course, the press is talking about it this morning. Yes, everyone was against the alternative for Germany politician, but when we saw it, they actually had a reasonable discussion with each other. That was the very first time I saw that it wasn't just shots fired at Trump or just shots fired at an alternative for Germany politician. No, Agnes Strack-Zimmermann literally said yes yesterday. And what are the Italians and the French doing? Nothing. They can only talk. That's all they can do. Yes, that was the perception of the whole thing, which might also have something to do with it. If the United States of America cuts off the liquefied natural gas, then we have a huge problem here. And if Azerbaijan is also in a bad mood and stops supplying us, the problem gets even bigger. You could even ask now, why have all the liquefied natural gas imports collapsed?
We have the Maskenlobe, who had the Young Unions Party conference sponsored by Azerbaijan, and then we have the Maskenhauptmann. He had expensive ads for Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan printed in his Thuringian constituency newspaper.
Now there is proven corruption. So not the one being accused, but the other party, which is also blue, comes from Bavaria and calls itself the Christian Social Union, but they've already been convicted for that. So we just want to briefly touch on that again, and the CDU as well. And because they're so afraid of the recognizability of the blue logo, they're now all in a different shade of blue and in black. But they forgot that Zweites Deutsches Fernsehen simply, I have to say it like this, they simply forgot to delete this video.
That went very well. First, there was an illegal party donation for the CDU in Frankfurt, reportedly received by CDU parliament member Axel Fischer, who is also on the CDU federal board with his colleague Olaf Göttinger.
That's when it starts to get funny. The one party, which we can say is demonstrably Putin's party, accuses the other party, where they constantly carry out house searches, where some judges order things like that, who know exactly what they're supposed to look for, and then still don't find anything, and then accuse the others of it. And they, in turn, and no, that has nothing to do with Hochsauerland. That was just a girl who was pretty close to a female Social Democratic Party member and was herself a member of the Young Socialists, where the Chancellor's wife had nothing to do with giving a judge the order to conduct a house search there. No, they would never do that. That would be illegal. And the so-called employed judge is, of course, not actually employed. With the lady related to Friedrich Merz, she simply didn't know anything about it, and there was no connection either. If you conduct a house search with Friedrich Merz, do you remember that? But to go into that again, now Katharina Reich comes into play, who, by the way, knew this whole connection quite well. There's also a nice video about that.
The energy transition is coming under political pressure. The so-called grid connection package is questioning key principles of the energy transition. Critics see this as a frontal attack on the expansion of wind and solar energy.
So, dear Greens, how do you actually feel when you hear about this? Yes, you knew that Katharina Reich was together with the Azerbaijan connection. She hung around with the CDU, to put it in plain words. And that the Chancellor, who lied to everyone and just before that changed the constitution to help them out, you didn't think that he would lie to you too, dear Social Democratic Party. You don't believe that the Chancellor is lying to you. Well, the man just wanted to become Chancellor, yes, and now some really dirty details about this person are coming to light. And you really thought he would just keep going like that? And you really thought they probably wouldn't take any more money from Azerbaijan? I can't prove it, but this double standard is really intense, isn't it?
On April 29, the exemption expires for the United States government's sanctions against PCK Schwedt. In this context, the Citizens Alliance for the Future of Schwedt, which mainly consists of employees of the local refinery, has addressed an open letter to Chancellor Merz. They describe their great concerns about the future and urge him to do everything in his power to secure a permanent exemption for the PCK refinery. I'm interested to know if the Chancellor received this letter and if he plans to comply with the Citizens Alliance's request.
It is generally standard practice that we do not comment on open letters here. I would stick to that in this case as well.
PCK Schwedt is an oil refinery and thousands of jobs depend on it. Open letters are only commented on when Friedrich Merz sends them to von der Leyen. Well, maybe they don't know each other personally, or one of them doesn't want anything to do with the other. You can't really say for sure, not with the CDU and not with the Christian Social Union either, but that's not what today is about. The follow-up question is about to get a lot more explosive, and I can already tell you, I'm actually curious about the overall energy.
The large refinery PCK Schwedt plays an existential role in supplying the entire Northeast, including the capital region. 95% of all fuels consumed in East Germany and Berlin are produced there. I would be interested to know, could the federal government, specifically the BMWI, explain what concrete steps have been taken since October 2025 to develop a viable and timely follow-up regulation for the future of PCK Schwedt and the thousands of jobs dependent on it?
They don't want to comment on that either because it's election season. Friends, we're simply not allowed to say anything anymore. Well, maybe some parties will just submit a small inquiry. Oh, right, that's not possible either. Then it's about critical infrastructure again. What's next? Do you realize right now how you're being fooled? We actually have no idea. We only know one thing. One of these two sides has been massively misrepresented and lied to. But one thing should be clear to all of us, and that is, how will we get energy in the future? That's the big question that's at stake right now. And no, I don't have an answer like I usually do. Instead, I have a big fat question mark up there, and I don't just feel misled, I feel absolutely made fun of. But now the left, the Greens, and parts of the Social Democratic Party feel the same way because they're a bit afraid that we might go back to fossil fuels. Just imagine, the PZK Schwedt is simply allowed to keep running just like that, and it gets a special permit that's not limited in time. and we go back to using oil, which, by the way, can be integrated better and for longer and would definitely provide more energy. And that would, of course, also explain reducing renewables and maybe even lowering the gas storage a bit. And then, hey, maybe someday going back to nuclear energy. Yeah, and then I woke up and I just can't imagine any of that actually happening.